She was trained to stop bleeding and keep people alive. Yet nothing prepared her for the moment she realized the life in front of her was not human and still needed her just the same. One step closer, and she understood that if she turned away now, two small lives would fade quietly while the world stayed silent, and that silence would follow her forever. Let me take you back to where it all began. Caroline Ray did not come to Alaska to be brave. She came because it was the only place quiet enough to hide from the things she carried inside her. And on that day, she was only doing her job, walking the long white stretch near the ice edge, checking markers, counting steps, keeping her mind busy so it would not drift back to faces she could not save. She moved slow and careful because mistakes out here did not forgive you, and although she had learned that lesson years ago in a very different place, she still lived by it now. Her radio stayed quiet, and she was glad for that, because quiet meant no one needed her, and she told herself she was done being needed. Then she heard it, not loud and not sharp, but weak and broken, like something asking for help without knowing if anyone was listening. She stopped, not because she wanted to, but because her body always reacted before her mind, and she turned toward the sound even while telling herself not to. When she reached the small rise of snow, she saw the shape first, large and still, covered in frost so thick it looked like part of the ground, and for a moment she thought she was too late, because stillness like that usually meant only one thing. Then she saw the cub, pressed close under the bear's chest, mouth open in a sound that barely came out, and another shape behind it that did not move at all. Caroline's hand shook, and she hated that because she prided herself on steady hands, but her hands remembered other moments like this, moments when time slowed and the choice to act or freeze changed everything. She crouched down slowly, speaking without meaning to, telling the bear she was there, telling the cub it was not alone, using the same calm voice she once used with wounded soldiers who were scared and hurting. The mother bear's eyes opened just enough to see her, and there was no anger in them, only a deep, tired look that felt too familiar, a look Caroline had seen on mothers before, the kind that says, "I have given all I have, and I will give more if I must." Caroline reached out and felt the cold locked into the bear's side, solid and cruel, and she knew right then that this was not a simple rescue, because the ice had already decided how this story should end. Still, she began anyway, because walking away was never something she learned how to do, not when someone was depending on her. She pulled off her pack and worked with slow care, digging, clearing, pressing her own warmth against the cub, counting breaths out loud even when no one answered, because counting kept panic away. The cub shifted once, and that small movement hit her harder than any sound ever could, because it meant there was still time, even if that time was thin. The mother bear made a low sound then, not angry and not afraid, but heavy, and Caroline paused, meeting her eyes again, and in that look was a question that did not need words. Caroline swallowed and said softly that she would do what she could, because it was the only promise she ever knew how to make. As the minutes passed and her fingers burned with cold, the storm began to close in, not loud, just steady, and Caroline knew help would not come fast enough even if she called for it, so she made another choice, the kind that never shows up in reports, the kind that lives only with the person who makes it. She wrapped the living cub inside her jacket, holding it close to her chest, and the mother bear watched every move, breathing slow and shallow, waiting. Caroline whispered again, telling the bear she would keep the cub warm, telling her she would not drop it, telling her things she once wished someone had told her when she was younger and afraid. The bear shifted her head with effort and nudged the cub toward Caroline, and in that moment, Caroline felt something break open inside her, because trust like that is heavy and sacred, and she understood the cost of it right away. She stood slowly, heart pounding, knowing she could not carry them all, knowing the choice had already been made, and behind her the ice gave a long, deep sound that meant it was no longer stable. Caroline turned back one last time, locking eyes with the mother bear, and the bear did not move, because she was not meant to. And as Caroline stepped away with the cub pressed against their chest, she realized this rescue was already taking more than it gave, and the hardest part had not even begun. Caroline did not look back again, not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much, and if she turned around, her legs might refuse to move forward. The cub in her coat was trembling, its tiny body shaking with cold, and she pressed it closer, pulling the thick lining of her jacket over its back as best she could. Her breath came hard and fast, not from panic, but from the weight of what she was carrying. Not just the cub, but the decision, the kind that sticks to your ribs and doesn't let go. The wind was sharper now. It blew hard from the west, kicking up sheets of snow that stung her face, but she kept walking, leaning forward to balance the weight. Her boots crunched through the frozen layer of ice, slipping now and then on the slick surface, but she didn't stop. The observation post was just under a mile away, but in this weather, even 50 feet felt like a mile. She could no longer feel her fingertips, but her grip on the cub never loosened. She whispered to it, the way you'd talk to a baby on a long car ride, low and steady, just to keep it calm. "You're okay, little one. You stay awake now. We're almost there. Don't fall asleep on me, you hear me?" The cub didn't answer, of course, but its breathing was still going, shallow but real, and that was enough for her to keep moving. By the time the station came into view, her legs were starting to go numb, the edges of her vision blurred. Her thoughts drifted back, not by choice, but to another time when she carried someone in her arms, a soldier, barely 20, bleeding through his uniform, whispering the name of his sister over and over as she held pressure to his wound. That boy didn't make it. She had carried him all the way to the evac point, talking the whole time just like this, and he had died before the chopper landed. "Not this time," she said aloud, surprising herself. The steel siding of the station looked like a gift from heaven when she finally reached it. She fumbled with the keypad on the door, entering the emergency override, and nearly fell inside as the door swung open. The warmth hit her skin like fire. She dropped to her knees, clutching the cub, shielding it from the blast of heat as she closed the door behind her. She sat there on the floor for a moment, catching her breath. Her chest heaved, her face burned. The cub's eyes were closed now, but she could still feel its heartbeat through the thin layers of cloth between them. She moved quickly after that, no time to rest. She laid the cub on a folded wool blanket near the heater, opened the storage unit, and grabbed a large thermal pack from the medical supplies. She wrapped it gently around the cub's small frame and tucked another blanket over it, all while talking low and steady. "You're okay. You're safe now. You did so good." She didn't cry, not yet. Her face felt stiff and her jaw locked tight, holding in every emotion that fought to get out. She rubbed the cub's back with 2 fingers, slow circles, just like she had seen bear handlers do when she first trained for the field. Then, only then, did she walk to the desk and press the radio. "Base camp, this is Ray at Station 4. I need medvac, animal emergency, juvenile polar cub, probable hypothermia, mother unrecoverable. Repeat, mother unrecoverable. Respond?" The line crackled but stayed quiet. She pressed again. "Base camp, respond, please." More static. Caroline stared at the radio for a long moment before dropping her hand. She turned back to the cub, and her eyes locked on its tiny form. Its breathing was slower now, but still there. She moved back to it, kneeling close. "You don't give up now. Not now. You held on for this long. You stay with me. Do you hear me? You stay." As she sat beside the cub, she slowly pulled off her jacket, revealing the soaked thermal gear underneath. Her arms were red from cold burns, her knuckles raw, but she didn't feel any of it. All she saw was the small creature curled up beneath the blanket, trusting her completely. Her breath cracked when she spoke next. "She gave you to me. I don't even know why. Maybe she knew I needed you as much as you needed saving." She didn't realize she was crying until she felt the tear run down her cheek. It was warm. It landed on the cub's fur. The cub twitched in its sleep, but didn't wake. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the room fell still. She did not sleep that night. She stayed next to the cub, holding her hand close so it would know it was not alone. She stayed on the floor longer than she planned to, watching every rise and fall of the cub's chest. It was light, like a whisper, but steady. She wasn't used to steady.
For years, everything in her life came in sharp waves, orders, noise, blood, silence. But this was different. It was so quiet now that she could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, and that sound scared her more than she expected. She stood slowly, knees aching, and shuffled to the side cabinet where the old kettle sat. She filled it with bottled water and turned the burner on. It clicked 3 times before catching. That noise made her flinch, though she hid it even from herself. As the water heated, she glanced back at the cub. Its fur had started to rise a little, puffing with warmth, and its tiny paws curled closer to its chest. She reached for a tin of honey she kept tucked behind the dried oats, something sweet, something warm. She didn't know if the cub would take it, but she had to try. The kettle hissed gently. She poured some hot water into a cup, stirred in the honey, and let it cool until it was just warm enough to touch.
By mid-morning, the clouds thinned just enough to show pieces of the pale sky. It wasn't blue, not really, but it was less gray, and in Alaska, that was enough to make you believe things might turn. Caroline opened the window slightly, just enough to let in a bit of fresh air without dropping the temperature too much. The cub stirred at the new scent. It didn't cry, it didn't make a sound, but its little nose twitched twice and its front paw moved, slow but certain. She brought over a second towel warmed by the heater, folded it, and gently adjusted the cub's position so it could breathe easier. Its fur was beginning to dry, not all the way, but enough that the frost was gone. As she moved around the room, checking supplies, refilling her water flask, her mind stayed near the cub. It had become an anchor in a place that often felt like it was floating too far from the world. She had spent 6 months alone at Station 4, filing wildlife data, watching herd movements, tracking temperatures. No one had sent her here as punishment, but she knew what it looked like. Someone trying to disappear. Someone trying to be useful without being seen. But now there was a life here, a small life, and something about that shifted the room's air. It wasn't just her breathing anymore. Later, she sat at the table with a tin of crackers and the last pouch of soup. She wasn't hungry, but she made herself eat. You don't get to fall apart when someone needs you. That rule had carried her through the worst. She took slow bites, eyes always drifting back to the little body curled beside the heater. The cub had moved again. Its paw rested against the edge of the crate now, like it had pushed itself closer to the warmth. She reached out and ran a fingertip down the side of its neck. Soft, thin, vulnerable. "You made it through the night," she said. "Not everyone does." The radio buzzed once, not a full message, just static. She turned toward it, but didn't move. If they had something to say, they'd say it again. She closed her eyes for a second, just a second. Then a voice cracked through. "Station 4, this is base camp. Weather is breaking. Chopper en route. ETA 90 minutes. She exhaled slow and deep, picked up the radio. "Copy, base camp. I'll have the cub ready." There was a pause. "Repeat last? Did you say cub?" "I did." Another pause, longer this time. "We'll be prepared." She set the radio down. 90 minutes. That was fast, considering the ice conditions, but it also meant goodbye was coming. She stood and crossed the room, knelt beside the crate. The cub was awake now, eyes open just a bit, still weak, still slow, but awake. She sat beside it and whispered, "They're coming for you, people who can help, people who can raise you right. You won't have to fight for every breath." She paused. "You won't have to survive just to survive." The words made her throat tighten. She swallowed it back. This wasn't the time. The next hour passed in quiet preparation. She moved with focus, packed the medical bag, double-checked the insulated wrap, wrote a note with the cub's weight, condition, estimated age, taped it to the crate. When she was done, she sat down on the floor again, legs stretched out, arms resting on her knees. The cub was watching her now, small black eyes that didn't blink much. It wasn't fear, it was something else, something slower, maybe curiosity or memory. She didn't look away. "Your mother stayed behind," she said gently. "You probably know that. She chose to stay in the ice. I don't know what she felt or what she understood, but she didn't move when she could have. She let me take you."
The cub blinked. Caroline wiped her hand over her mouth. She didn't fight me. She didn't growl. She just watched. And that silence, that look, it was the most human thing I've seen in years. She didn't say more. What else was there? When the chopper came, she heard it long before it landed. The rumble cut through the air like a memory, not of helicopters, but of the way she used to feel when someone else took over, when help arrived, and she wasn't the only one holding the weight. The door rattled as the wind shifted. She stood, lifted the crate, and carried it slowly toward the exit. Outside, the snow was blowing soft now, a breeze more than a storm. The helicopter touched down on the flat snowbank to the east, where they'd landed food deliveries before. She held the crate close, moved through the snow one slow step at a time, and when she reached the edge of the bank, a tall man stepped down from the side of the chopper and walked toward her. "Are you Caroline Ray?" he called over the engine noise. "I am." "You're the one who called in the cub?" She nodded. He paused, looked at her, then at the crate, then back. "They said the mother didn't make it." Caroline didn't speak. She didn't need to. The man's voice softened. "Do you want to place him inside?" She nodded again. They moved together toward the back of the chopper. She set the crate down gently on the seat, adjusted the blanket one last time, and stood back. The man placed a tag on the side of the crate, paused, then turned to her. "We'll do our best." She looked at him, her voice quiet but firm. "I know you will." The door closed. The blade spun harder. She stepped back and watched the machine lift, watched it tilt and rise until it disappeared into the gray sky. And just like that, the sound faded. Caroline turned back toward the station. The snow had picked up again, soft but steady. She didn't hurry. There was no reason to. She had done what she came to do. And now, the quiet didn't scare her anymore. Caroline didn't go inside right away. She stood outside in the snow, her hands stuffed deep into her pockets, face tilted slightly upward. The helicopter was gone, the cub was gone, and yet something still held her there, standing in the wind like she was waiting for a second goodbye. There was nothing dramatic about the way the moment ended. No music, no sudden burst of emotion, just a quiet stillness, and the kind of ache that only settles in when you're not trying to fight it anymore. When she finally stepped back inside the station, everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The blanket was still folded on the floor near the heater. The crate was empty. The water pot was still warm, but the presence that had filled the space for the last 24 hours was gone. She sat down on the edge of the cot and let her shoulders drop. She didn't cry, not because she didn't feel it, but because there was nothing left to release. What had passed between her and that animal, between her and that mother, it didn't live in words. It had lived in action, in choice, in trust, and it was finished now. She didn't know if the cub would survive. She didn't know if the rescue center had the tools or the time, but she knew this: she had done what she could. For once, it was enough. Still, she couldn't sit for long. Her body was restless, too used to movement. She grabbed her parka again, pulled on her boots, and walked out toward the ice ridge. It took her 30 minutes to reach the place where she had first seen them. The snow had already begun to erase the trail. The body of the second cub was gone, probably claimed by scavengers or buried by the wind. The space where the mother laid was quiet, only a faint dip in the ice where her body once pressed. But Caroline saw it. One paw print, pressed into the ice, clear as day, facing outward, towards the sea. She crouched beside it, reached into her jacket and pulled something from her inner pocket. It was a small patch, faded green, the edge frayed, letters barely visible. She ran her thumb across the stitching. It had been hers, the last patch she had worn before they pulled her from the field, before they said she wasn't fit anymore. She placed it gently in the center of the paw print, pressed it down into the snow, then stood. That patch didn't belong on her anymore. It belonged here, with the one who had made the kind of choice she understood better than she wanted to. She turned back toward the station, her legs heavier now. The walk back felt longer. The cold reached deeper. But her heart, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel as empty. That night she made a fire. She hadn't lit one in months. She sat beside it, a cup of warm tea in her hand, staring at the flames until they blurred. The storm outside returned. The wind picked up. The walls creaked. But the silence inside felt different now. Not lonely, just quiet. She didn't reach for the radio. She didn't open her notebook. She didn't try to explain it, because what happened out there didn't need to be written down to be remembered. Some things are carved in places no pen can reach. The fire crackled quietly as the hours passed. Caroline didn't move from her spot on the floor, her back against the wall, her fingers wrapped around the same mug of tea that had long since gone cold. But she didn't mind. She was drinking it for the warmth. She was holding it because it gave her hands something to do. Outside, the snow kept falling. She watched it through the small window, flakes spinning in tight circles, carried by wind that changed its mind every 5 minutes. It reminded her of something one of the old trackers had told her months ago, back when she first took the outpost job. You can't read the sky out here like you do down south. Here, the sky lies. The wind's the only thing that tells the truth. At the time, she hadn't understood what he meant, but now she did. She got up slowly, stretched her legs, and walked to the old cabinet by the wall. Inside was a thick folder, one she hadn't touched in weeks. It held every field note she had taken since arriving, maps, animal logs, weather records, nothing remarkable.
3 days later, a letter came. Not a call, not a message over the radio, just a plain white envelope slipped inside the crate of supplies from the station at Port Franklin. Caroline found it folded between canned meat and medical gauze. There was no name on the front, just a small blue sticker in the corner with a number she didn't recognize. She turned it over once, then again, and opened it slowly. The handwriting was neat, careful. She read the first line twice. "We believe the cub will survive." Her hands tightened around the paper, and she sat down slowly on the edge of the cot, reading each word as if it might change before she finished. He was dehydrated, underweight, and near frostbite on all 4 limbs, but no infection. We've started feeding on schedule. He responds best when held. There is strong evidence he recognizes human voice patterns, especially female voices. Caroline paused. Her chest rose once, tight, then fell. "We named him Arlo for internal tracking, but if you had another name in mind, we can adjust." She smiled without meaning to. It was small, barely there, but it was real. The letter continued. "His prognosis is good. The next few weeks are critical, but barring complications, he will reach full strength. We are logging every detail for possible documentation and release if the public becomes involved." Caroline folded the paper carefully and tucked it into the breast pocket of her flannel shirt. She didn't cry, but her eyes burned. That night she made a cup of hot tea and sat beside the heater where the crate had once been. She looked at the empty spot on the floor, just the blanket now, folded neatly. No small body curled on it, no quiet breathing. She whispered softly, "You made it, Arlo." And for the first time she said his name out loud. She repeated it once more, then stood. She walked to the map on the wall, ran her finger across the northern line that connected to the port, then to the facility where the cub was now. It wasn't far. She could visit. Not tomorrow, not this week, but someday. And she knew when she did, he'd remember her. That's what kept her moving now. That idea, that single thought that she hadn't just saved something, she'd been part of something. She looked out the window again. The ridge was still there, the sea still waiting, and in her heart a silence that no longer felt like punishment, but peace. Until the call came, at midnight, 3 words through static,
Caroline, we need you." She sat up straight. The voice on the radio was rough, distant, broken by static, but she knew it. It was Hayes from Station 2, a voice she hadn't heard in months, not since the first storm, not since they stopped checking in more than once a week. He was the kind of man who never called unless something was wrong, something bad. She reached for the receiver, fingers tight around the base. "Caroline, I copy. What's going on?" The silence lasted 5 seconds, maybe less, but it felt longer. "It's another one," he said. "Another what?" She didn't ask. She waited. "Bear, big one, female, alone, circling the station for hours, not hunting, not scared, just staying." Caroline didn't understand, not right away. "She's not aggressive?" she asked. "No, that's the thing. She just sits, in the snow, facing us, won't leave." She closed her eyes. Then he said, "There's something off. You need to come." She didn't ask why her, she already knew. Not because she was a medic, not because she'd done rescues before, but because they all knew what happened at the ridge, and somehow maybe this new bear knew too. "I'll head out at first light," she said. "Tell your team not to go outside. Keep the station quiet. No movement. I'll be there in 5 hours." The line cut. She sat still for a moment, hand resting on the cold metal of the radio. It didn't make sense. Unless it did. Unless the mother bear from the ridge hadn't gone far. Unless she followed the scent or the memory. And if it was her... Caroline stood up, packed a new supply bag, food, water, medical wraps. Not for people this time. She dressed fast, no hesitation. She left the note on the table in case someone came looking. "Gone to Station 2. Stay inside. If I don't return by dusk, send backup. C." She didn't leave behind anything else. As she stepped outside, the air was thick again, but the wind was still. Her boots crunched softly against the top layer of snow. The sky above was full of dark blue, just starting to shift into that pale gray that meant morning was close. She walked. She didn't rush, because whatever waited for her out there, she already knew. It wouldn't be something to fear. It would be something to understand. She walked until the sky changed. What had been a wall of gray finally gave way to something lighter, something that looked almost like morning. Her breath came in steady clouds, and the only sound was the soft crush of snow beneath her boots. She'd made this route before, but never like this, never with her heart pounding like it was now. There was no fear, not really, just that feeling you get when you know something is waiting for you and you're not sure what it wants. The radio stayed silent. She preferred it that way. As she crested the ridge overlooking Station 2, she saw it immediately. A dark shape in the snow, still as stone, about 15 feet from the building's main entrance. Big, solid, facing the door. The bear. She slowed her steps, dropped her pack a few yards back, kept walking. Hayes must have seen her through the window, because the door cracked open just enough to call out. "She hasn't moved since midnight." "Don't open the door again," Caroline said. "Just stay inside." She kept her eyes on the bear as she moved closer. The wind caught her scarf and pulled it tight against her cheek. She didn't adjust it. At 20 feet, the bear turned her head slightly. Not fast, just enough to let Caroline know she was seen. Then it made a sound. Low, deep. Not a growl, not a warning, something else, something heavy. Caroline stopped walking. "Hey," she said, barely a breath. "You remember me?" The bear didn't move. "I know you," Caroline said softer. "You gave me your cub." Still nothing. Caroline took one step closer. The bear looked past her, toward the pack she'd dropped. Caroline turned, then walked back, pulled out a blanket and a thermal wrap and set them gently on the snow between them. "I have what I have. I don't know what you need, but I'm here." The bear looked at the items, then back at Caroline, and then, slowly, shakily, it stood. Caroline stepped back, just once. The bear didn't charge, didn't roar. It walked to the thermal wrap, sniffed it once, then sat back down. Caroline's breath caught, because from this close she could see the wound, a deep red mark down the bear's side, hidden by layers of fur, but fresh enough to still bleed. Not life-threatening yet, but dangerous if untreated. She crouched slowly. "I can help," she said, voice steady, "but only if you let me." She didn't move closer. She waited. The bear didn't react. She took that as a yes. She didn't reach for her bag right away. Instead, she stayed crouched, hands resting on her knees, keeping her eyes low so the bear wouldn't feel challenged. The air between them was quiet, almost too quiet. No wind, no movement, just two beings, one human, one animal, sharing the same cold ground with the same kind of pain. After a minute, maybe two, she backed up slowly, step by step, no sudden moves. She retrieved her medical bag, unzipped it slowly, and pulled out the smallest roll of gauze she had, a soft cloth, and a heat pack she'd cracked open hours earlier, still warm. She returned with slow, careful steps. The bear didn't move. At 5 feet away, Caroline knelt again. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, voice steady. "You let me take your cub. You gave me something I didn't deserve. I won't fail you now." She extended the cloth first, letting it rest in the snow. The scent would travel, clean, human, unfamiliar, but not threatening. The bear sniffed once. Caroline waited. Then, inch by inch, she moved forward until she was close enough to see the gash clearly. It wasn't deep enough to have struck bone, but it had torn through skin, maybe from ice, maybe from another animal, but it was real, and untreated it would fester. She soaked the cloth with warm water and began to clean the area. Her hands didn't shake, not because she was afraid, but because she respected the moment too much to show it. The bear flinched once. Caroline paused.